Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So my other videos were morbid, but reality sometimes is morbid. Let me check my video first. So let's have a 420. I don't know if I've done a 420 in a while, so let's have a 420. Let's have a proper 420. And good, sounds good. There are things. I've often said that pot hit my heart center. I usually process things in my head. Like, I accept that most things are generated by emotion. It prods people a particular way. Why did you choose this career? Why did you behave in this particular way? Why did you want this subject versus the other subject, etc., etc.? Emotions, it guide your thoughts. Your thoughts come in after the fact, but the emotions are the guiding thing. But I usually process this stuff through my head, often asking questions, and asking those questions in ways that people are like, why are you asking that question? I ask the question because you're taking this part as part and parcel to reality, and I'm asking you, why are you taking this as part and parcel to reality? It's just various things. It annoys the shit out of my wife and my mom. Pot allows me to get in touch with my heart center, and when I do certain videos, like there are certain things that hit on my 420s. I think sometimes in my head there's this little spark that goes off when I think of stuff like Art Bell. Now let me explain what I mean by this. So I like doing 420s at night. I've said that before. And I like doing them at night because I have this image in my head of the single guy. It could be a man or female. Saturday night, they've gotten back from a party or gotten back, maybe nothing to do. Maybe they're lonely, whatever. They're in their house Saturday night. The lights are out. They're listening to a YouTube channel or they're listening to a radio, and Art Bell's voice comes on. It doesn't matter what he's talking about. You just like him because he's Art Bell. And I find this thing in my head is like, it's the soothing aspect to knowing that this person is coming on. He's on live. It's happening each time, meaning regardless of what takes place, he's going to be there. And it's this kind of comforting thing where you kind of doze off listening to this calm, steady voice talking about fucking amazing things. to put an understatement on it. There may be certain things that you like of him, but you're not tuning in necessarily for what he's talking about. You're tuning in more so because it's him. There's a soothing quality to knowing that you're not alone in the universe and that there's somebody else there with you. So if I shoot for anything, I think it's that image in my head when I think of my 420s. I did a morbid story. My last two stories were somewhat morbid because I think for me in my head it's this thing of a larger conflict. Depending on how these events unfold. The fact is, the fact that it's not Damascus, the fact that it may not be the United States and Syria as a proxy to the United States, is at the very least a recognition of Russia as a power. Otherwise, they would have struck Damascus and not thought twice about it. They understand the larger geopolitical conflicts associated with what's taking place. Israel is going to be used as a proxy so the United States can say we didn't do it. I understand you're upset, Russia, but we didn't do it. That was Israel. They're a country unto themselves, knowing full goddamn well that they were probably pushed, or that they didn't need to be pushed, but they were working in tandem with the United States for this particular military regime change policy. So let's think about other things for the moment, but let's use this as a pivot point. Say this tumbles down a rabbit hole like it tumbled down a rabbit hole in World War I. Duke is shot by a Slav, and being shot, one nation after the next, after the next, after the next, all based on these political allegiances, fall in line and end up in a conflict, almost in this kind of mechanical way. Assume the same for the moment. Yes, I'm going to take you into terrors, but I'm hoping that I'm going to end up in an interesting place. But I need to go there first because I have no other conception on how to get to where I want to get to without going through that particular point, that catastrophe. Russia, China, Syria, North Korea, Turkey, all in somewhat of a political alignment and a military alignment. The United States and Western NATO powers. The globe squares off. No corner of the earth is safe. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who's winning or losing the war, because with a nuclear bomb, they're going to be fired. The first side that starts to lose, the first side that becomes immensely clear that they're going to lose. They're going to say, if you take one more step, this is what's going to take place. They're going to draw a line in the sand and they're going to fire those missiles when they need to fire those missiles. The brass is going to be talking to the president in the same way the brass in that country is going to be talking to the leader of that country. And even though I don't think these countries necessarily want to go to nuclear war, it doesn't really matter what they want. The brinksmanship itself, the definition of brinksmanship, is taking it to the brink. Assuming for the moment that you understand the political internal dynamics of those other countries, that those other countries would not take action when you come to the brink, would not do something when you come to the brink. That's your appraisal. That's your opinion, man. That's not necessarily indicative of what reality is. Assume for the moment that their intelligence is wrong. Assume for the moment that their brinksmanship has dire consequences, and it causes an immaculate catastrophe. Missiles are fired. China shoots down the United States missiles, shutting off their ability to air their eyes around the globe. The United States has been spending $1 trillion on their military, but it's a capitalistic country. The goal of that is not necessarily to get actually badass military weapons. The goal of it in those companies is to maximize their profit. They make cash. A lot of that money, for the most part, is just squandered. So even though, yes, we're spending $1 trillion on military, it's not necessarily indicative of $1 trillion worth of military goods. Let's assume for the moment that 400 billion of that is fluff, put in people's pockets, squandered. And let's say you get 200 billion in actual, real, physical matter, reality stuff. And I know I'm using a particular scale, but I'm saying, what would work produce for $1 trillion worth of military spending? What would it look like? Put it on the graph. Based on labor, based on everything else, whatever that number is, put it on the graph. And assume for the moment, though, that this is like any other capitalistic enterprise. You have people extracting wealth out of that process. So just because you're spending that money is not necessarily mean that that's what you're getting in regards to real world things. People make that assumption. The number itself is so astronomical in comparison to other nations. It's comically ridiculous. We assume that that's what we're getting. You don't know that. You assume that just because somewhere else is spending $80 billion in their military spending, that $80 billion is not necessarily maximized in some other way. Meaning it's exacerbating a capacity that they have that we are deficient in. That us, being the unipolar power around the world and strutting our stuff, is somewhat like a bully waiting to be hit in the eye. Assume for the moment that the world falls apart. That's what I'm saying. Missiles. It all fails. The governments collapse. Not just governments collapse. Poverty, war, crime, civil war, strifes all throughout the United States. As you have these people not having access to the things that they need. You have a society in this country that are completely detached from the real world. The difficulties that other people were having in the real world, and all at once they're experiencing those things in real time. This country is awash in guns. What does that look like? What does it look like? Same thing's going on abroad, though. One country after the next, after the next, after the next. Militaries continue to fight. Societies themselves continue to fall apart. Nuclear havoc. You have weapons that you didn't even know that you had being used in other nations. You have these craft, look like UFOs. Again, didn't even know that you had flying around, engaged in military conflict. It is a war to end all wars. There is nothing that's hidden. Everything is on the table because this is a war to end all wars. Everything falls apart. That's where we're at. Exist in that. If you've ever played Fallout, exist in that. Soak in that. I want to drill down into this thing of, this is literally what we're talking about. I want to soak into that for the moment. This is potential. World falls apart. Now, in saying that the world falls apart, and saying that this is potential, and existing in this for the moment, assume that at some point, 100 years, whatever, some kind of dark age, this global dark age, that you have slivers of society that start to aggregate around themselves. There's still components of technology, there's still elements of the stuff that are like pockets, But society itself, elements, small pockets, start to accrue, start to organize. And they come up with a particular philosophy. And they say, never again. Never again. We would never let this take place again. We have a hegemonic view that we're going to be a compassionate and cooperative society. Humanity matters exceptionally more. All humans are gifted. All humans are immaculate. All humans are amazing. That is our hegemonic and workable point of view. And that is the way we're going to go about our affairs. And that group grows. And not just grows. It meets and ends up with other groups. And those groups start to aggregate around that particular philosophy. The technology that it remains from this allows them to connect to other people around the world. Whether you want to call it Twitter, Facebook, whatever. The internet does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to survive nuclear holocausts. And in the same way that we're interacting now, those people were able to interact with that particular technology and talk back and forth. Assume for the moment, in this kind of utopian way, that these groups, with this particular workable point of view, created somewhat of a fulcrum around the world. Meaning, as they started to grow and as they started to expand and as they started to, at the very least, create some semblance of society again, that workable point of view remained in their system. And they said, we need to organize ourselves in a way that instantiates this point of view. Meaning in the things that we do and the things that we do for law, the things that we do with one another in regards to how we provide for each other, how we provide housing, medication, education, how we do these things. That these things are ensconced in our society in a way, in the body of organization, that they're espoused, not detracted from. Meaning, we want to incentivize this behavior. We want to incentivize this particular mode of thought. That's what we want to do. When we're talking about patriotism in our society, we're talking about people doing things in the service of our organization, of our society itself. We want to organize ourselves in a way where crime, antagonisms, those things are not a part of our society. We don't even want people to know that those things exist. We will keep a record of prehistory, thus their foibles, their fuck-ups, how they did those things. We will read books on how they were insane, how they were so rapacious. Why were they that way? How did they allow themselves to get to that point? How did they allow themselves to go over to the brink? And they would see, they would think they were insane. In the same way that we looked at Romans, in the same way that Romans looked at the Greeks or someone else. Post-history. We would be prehistory. As that society grows, imagine how that society would function. Imagine what would people do during their day. Meaning, the society has organized itself in a way where it says, we're going to delegate certain responsibilities to certain organizations. These organizations, meaning, one is going to make sure that somebody always has adequate housing, always have food, always have this kind of medical education. That's our job. That's what we do. That's the purpose of government in a sense. None of this other ridiculousness of wars and everything else. We're past that. This is what we do. Now, it's not a perfect society because there is no perfect society. And the fact is, trying to put that in as a hegemonic viewpoint acknowledges that human beings have a range of thought in regards to how they go about their affairs. But what is a range of thought when you don't have movies where you're shooting people in the face? Because you wouldn't think to have movies of people shooting people in the face. Well, you don't have societies that have years and years and years of war and bloodshed and conflict. When those things, where resources are not used for those things. Resources are used for the betterment of the society itself because that's the workable point of view of the society. What does it look like? When anybody in your society can get an education. If they want to go get a doctorate, they get a doctorate. When nobody is under this thing of, oh God, if I don't work, I'm not going to have a house. I'm not going to be able to eat. When it's not the situation where somebody is ill and that person all of a sudden loses all resources and everything else. That the very basics, the basic minimal things that you need are provided to you by the society because the society doesn't understand why not to do that. I'm talking about a revolution in values, how we go about our affairs. What does that world look like, a more sustainable world? Well, that particular government, part of that focus is making sure that the world is sustainable. There's very few duties. make sure everybody in the society has something to eat, make sure that the world remains sustainable, meaning nothing is taking place that is adversely affecting the world and the society to which we exist in. Yes, that requires some level of agreement and regulation. But the fact is, the regulation itself is not necessarily onerous because there is a different value set of the people in the society. You're not working in a society where your rules are working against your values. That's kind of the point I'm making to you. The society itself has a certain idea, it has a certain hegemonic viewpoint in the same way that we do. In the same way that we in no way could understand such things, that society in no way would be able to understand how we are working in the way that we're working. What does that world look like? Imagine for the moment that the society of the civilization has dropped to 3 billion people. Let's say 4 billion. A lot of people died. Let's say that the poverty level around the planet, for the most part, is nil. And that each and every one of those people on the planet has access to education. Meaning, there are no wars in the Middle East. Those people are going to school and getting educations. They're getting doctorates whenever they want to get doctorates. Same thing in America. Same thing in South America. Each continent has maximized the resources of human potential. What does that look like? Like, these people aren't murdering themselves. These people aren't killing themselves. We are not in those countries murdering and killing. The people in our world, in our society, educate themselves to the level they want to educate themselves because they understand their needs are no longer an issue. That's an amazing fucking planet. Now, fact is, that world is not necessarily something that's completely foreign to us or impossible to us. It's a quirk of how we go about our affairs. It's a quirk of values. We have the technological resources to do it. I haven't said added anything else from the standpoint of technology. All of those things are available to us. We have technology to make sure that each of us have the things that we need. Those things are just quirks of how we see ourselves and how we organize ourselves. One of the hegemonic viewpoints in that society would be that technology is to work at the behest of human beings, not the other way around. Meaning, if you have the capacity to automate a job, you automate a job. Now, I would argue that this should be a property of government. If nothing else, allow people to be people. Find ways to allow people to be people and allow people to give and contribute in the ways that those people want to give and contribute. Growth is something else in the society. It's different. You have a society of happy human beings. Are they growing at a rapacious rate where they're destroying the planet? No. Do they need to grow that way? No. Do they have access to the things that they need? Yes. Infinite growth is ridiculous. Infinite growth is ridiculous. Sustainability is the point. That's always the point. A human being needs to live into something. And if the environment is tarnished and everything else, the human being will suffer. One last point on this I want to make. I want to add a sci-fi element to this. Say for the moment that people in this society who have access to the things they need, who don't necessarily have poverty in the way that we would understand it, say they advance their technologies. Of course they would advance their technologies. Ultimately, they're not starting from nil. And not only not starting from nil, you have all of this actualized potential from all around the world, with people delving into physics, science, asking questions, not limited by war and poverty and disease and illness and all these other things. What does humanity look like when you release humanity from its needs? When it's not just basic survival. What does it look like? I'm saying that is an amazing fucking premise. That is an astonishing planet. When all of these people are doing things, pushing the levels of science, pushing the levels of art, pushing the levels of what it means to be a human being. Take a digital capacity for the moment. Someone creates a device that you put on the back of your neck, and that device puts you into this kind of virtual reality environment. It's not exactly right. The texture of it is slightly off, but for all intents and purposes, it looks. You can interact with people in this. It looks like a certain world. Imagine all of the shit that takes place in this. You have people being Wolverine, people being knights, people flying about battleships, people having space battles. And then the government says, look, we accept that there can be certain elements that change in our society. Meaning that people can change. People can take a certain tilt. But we don't want to go back to where we were. Never again. It's in the Constitution. Never again. The government will take all action necessary to make sure that we do not slip back into hysteria and absurdity. The government looks at this technology and says, we're going to change our school system. So the school system in this society is different than the school system in our society. It's configured differently. They would think about this stuff differently. You don't have this about sex education. You assume that's sex education because people have human bodies. By the same token, you don't have this issue with nudity. You don't have the issue with sex. You don't have the issue with... There's certain things that just fell away just because of the way the society has organized itself. In this very specific case, they look at this technology and say, we're going to add this to the education system. How? Okay, we're going to say that when a kid comes in, we're going to put the thing on the back of his neck and we're going to erase his memory. And we're going to allow that kid to grow up in this simulation, interacting with the world. And we're going to allow him to do this multiple times through the course of, let's say, a month. Now, they're doing this because they want this kid not to necessarily force this kid to be anything, but they want to put this kid into various situations that this kid can understand other workable points of view because he's being in all of these other situations. So he's being black and Mexican and Hispanic and white and gay and straight and everything else in between. Over and over and over and over and over again. Their curriculum is different. He's in this machine for a while. And then when he comes out this machine, he has several lifetimes under his belt that he has in his mind, that he has awareness of. Now, what does that look like? The reason they're doing this is because they want him to be a well-rounded person. And he's going to have to do this multiple times, thousands and thousands of lifetimes. They want him to be a well-rounded person. Their assumption is our society has reached a level that in order to maintain it and to keep it this way, we need people to be aware of the foibles and the fuck-ups that took place in the prior society in order to make sure this doesn't happen again. So we're going to incarnate people into multiple lifetimes. We're going to erase their memories. They're going to go through these lifetimes as if they're going through an entire life over and over and over again. The theory being, by the time they get to a particular age, that they would have lived all of these lives. They would have lived all of these languages, all of these experiences that they would be able to incorporate into their person, making them a more well-rounded human being. Meaning that the point of life in this situation is human development. We want well-rounded human beings. We want to raise the level of their consciousness. What does this society look like? And when I say that, I bring that up because we don't know what this is. The simulation thing, if you're talking about a way to manage a society to make sure that people don't necessarily flip out and wild out or fall back into hysteria, how do you do it? How do you keep human beings in check? And how do you keep a consciousness, for that matter, in check? Would putting them in something similar do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again? Yeah, maybe. What does it look like to the individual that's in that particular simulation? He doesn't know he's in a simulation. He doesn't even know that there is something else out there. He doesn't even know what that something else will look like from the perspective of the texture that he's in. If you ask him about this, he has stuff locked in his noggin, but he doesn't have access to that information because the simulation that he's in has nixed that part of his memory. Like, I bring this up because I'm always fascinated by this particular idea. You have some people who say nothing exists, and I always think of how on earth do they know that? You have other people who say God created man and God molded in his image. He fixed his testicles on himself. And I ask the same question. How do you know that? We don't know what this is. And when you start thinking from the standpoint of civilizations and catastrophes and everything else, it's so far-fetched that man could have gotten to the point where man started tinkering with things in order to get man more well-rounded in his personage. That means all of you could be fake, or all of you could be some kind of consciousness plugged into the outlet in the machine. What does that society look like? I ask that only to say, if you ensconce yourself in that society for the moment, take out the sci-fi element, but prior, society that uses technology in order to make sure people have the things that they need, that uses technology, government creates or has the mandate to make sure technology is made in a way that gets people the bare necessities of their life that they need, essentially abundance to each and every person. That is the job of government at that point. People have free reign to do whatever the hell they want, providing it doesn't damage or adversely affect the habitable space. Their needs are met. If you want to get an education, get an education. Fact is, your society is still going to be pushed along, and I would argue to you, be pushed along more so than a capitalistic system. All of these people, all of this potential that was wasted and squandered in the wars and fuckery, making these little trinkets that people buy at the stand because they're just trying to maximize their profit on things. Nobody needs that. They do it purely just for profit. That stuff goes away. The resources themselves are used for the human beings. The technology is used for human beings. The government's main key mandate, create technology that decreases or eliminates the labor that's required in creating homes, making sure essentially crops, making sure people have the things that they need, whether you have these vertical farms, however you need to do it. But provide for the bare necessities of life. Eliminate poverty. Your needs are met. Have fun. You're free. Real. Free. That's real freedom. That's actual freedom. That society is a quirk of thought. That's what I'm trying to get across. There's no God above. That society is a quirk of thought. It is a change of value system. Different society, change of value system. And the sad part is, we have everything right now to make that take place. It is aggravating to know that. Like, it's so aggravating to know that. It's like, it's not utopia because there is no such thing as utopia. But that is a society that's fundamentally different in how they go about their affairs. I'm not talking about a Star Trek society. I'm saying we have all the technological know-how, everything that's needed for that society that I'm talking about to take place already exists. What's missing is the cognitive difference of us. Cognitive change, just a twerk of the mind. Abundance for everybody. But we're stuck in this. Yes, it starts out morbid, but I kind of just want to make the point that there is no God above stopping this. All of this is a matter of choice. All of this is a matter of will. This is our choice. We've arranged ourselves in this way. The resources exist. The know-how exists. The technological skill exists. We can eliminate war, poverty, famine. All those things can be evaporated. It's just us. It just boils down to us. So, I'll leave it at that. This is a 420. It's not a, 420s aren't meant to do anything. They're just thought puzzles or thought pieces. Have to be honest, that always aggravates me though. Like, it's this knowledge that, yes, that's possible. Like, if technology was used in a way, think for the moment, if Jeff Bezos wasn't making $100 billion, say for the moment money wasn't a part of the process at all. Say for the moment that you had a distribution system where you can get goods to people who need those goods. Now, I take money out the complex just as a thought puzzle, but I kind of want to make the point that the resources exist. The distribution system exists. You have a system for getting people goods all across the world for whatever they need. Amazon is pretty much everything. You have your distribution system. Meaning, it's like these things exist. These things are just owned by top 1%. You have enough wealth to get rid of poverty 7 times over. Like, it's aggravating when you say that and you still have people in this desperate poverty, and you have this full understanding that the problem here is the system itself that allows, or the way that we've organized ourselves, and the value system that we've extracted from that way that we've organized ourselves. It's hard to shake people out of that. They don't see it. In their heads, capitalism is fucking awesome and all these people are just lazy bums who is looking for stuff. As opposed to, we can organize ourselves in any particular way. And if you get rid of poverty, and you get rid of need, and you get rid of desperation, you have a fundamentally different world. Even if you kept your capitalistic system and you still did that, you would unleash amazing potential across the planet. Amazing potential. Yeah. Luca Clemente, those changes happen concurrently in my experience. John Smith, from anti-gravity is a 4-dimensional gyroscope. I don't know what anti-gravity is. I don't know what space-time is for that matter. Keep in mind, all those things are just models. They're models. Like, when people never mistaken the model for the real thing. This is just the way we understand it. That could be right, it could be wrong. It's just the way we understand it. When you're thinking of an atom, it's like, oh, the atoms are protons, electrons, and neutrons. Yeah, there are things that behave in those ways. They're not little round circles. They're not little round balls that fly around and stuff. I mean, it's the model. It's how they understand it as human beings, how they get that across and explain it to other people. They're mistaking the model for the real thing. I don't know what space-time is. For all I know, the Big Bang was somebody turning on a computer. I have no idea. I don't think anybody does. Let's see. I saw something when I was doing this. Oh, here we are. I wonder if mainstream media is pushing war with Russia to validate the prior claim of Trump committing treason, as treason requires war with aided country by country. That's fucking interesting. That is interesting. Conspiratorial, but interesting. Balthazar 228. You're providing a necessary forum, and I thank you, Jamal. Pat Hacker. Oh, thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. I hope so. I don't know if anybody else is covering the war thing with Syria, but I find it to be a big fucking deal. And I said earlier, issues of war take precedence. I don't care if they demonetize it. I don't give a shit what they do. I am putting that video up. Those things are extraordinarily important and the public needs to see it. If 3 people are watching, fuck it, then I'm talking to 3 people. That's 3 people that didn't know it before. So yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Shwari Kate, James Wilkin, my apologies for screaming in the room. I didn't see the screaming, Kate. I missed the screaming. That's okay. If you need to get your rocks off, do your thing, scream your heart out. James Wilkinson, we love you, Jamar. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, James. Absolute Reign and Conquer. I've been telling the people in my house about Syria. Thanks, Jamal. I have too. My mom, at some point, her eyes glazes over. And my wife, she's at Disney World right now. And I can't, it's like, I really do hope people blaze one if they got one when I do these 420s, by the way. Because I want you to juxtapose my wife in Disney World, living it up, having a good fucking time. I talked to her just before I did it. She said, call me when you finish. I said, I will. And I started, and I was like, enjoy your time in Disney World. I love you. Enjoy your time at Disney World. Juxtapose her on some ride with Mickey Mouse ears, with missile strikes going on right now in Syria, that if those strikes hit Damascus, or if those strikes were in Damascus from the United States, and they could have been, mind you, Donald Trump has already said there'll be consequences for this, meaning the United States may still strike. Israel may have taken the time to jump the shark on this. We're assuming that they're working in coordination with one another. We don't know that as a flat fact. We'll assume it because they're military allies. Military allies tend to have communications with one another as they take on operations. But that could have been the United States doing that. And it still could tumble into some kind of larger conflict depending on how these affairs spit out. For instance, pretend for the moment that the Syrian military strikes Israel. Probably won't, but assume they do. Does the United States take a stake in this? Does that get the United States further involved in this conflict? And if the United States is further involved in this conflict, now I guess I'm trying to make the point of how this tumbles. How this tumbles. It's a weird thing to juxtapose those things. That's all. This knowledge in my head of prior wars and how those wars started. And then looking at this in real time. And you point to it and you say, oh my God, I've seen enough historical lectures, I've read enough books on this to see how these things get out of hand. This looks like this is getting out of hand. And screaming it, top of my lungs. Like, and it's this frailty of not, of like, yeah, just because you're aware of it, just because you're pointing to it, so what? People are going to go about their affairs. And then it's, what do you expect people to do about it, even if they know about it? It's this diminishment of sorts. It's weird. But fuck it. Doesn't matter. That's all you got. You got a trumpet, I'm going to blow it. That's all I got. Lee Camp is cool, but he kind of sold out. Lee Camp didn't sell out X Factor. What are you talking about? Carl Malone, I'm still waiting to hear mainstream media point to the area where Israel and Syria are having most encounters, has been illegally occupied by Israel since 1967. No such luck. You would never hear mainstream media say that. You would never hear that. You would never hear that. You absolutely never hear that. Lee Camp is a meth-fueled 802 of the orthodoxy. Why are you guys shitting on Lee Camp? Why are you shitting on Lee Camp? What has Lee Camp did? Lee Camp does this show. He does this thing. He's been exposing all sorts of shit. Lee Camp talks about shit like this. Oh yeah, so shitting on Lee Camp. Syria can't bomb Israel. They have like 6 planes, Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to happen. Syria barely was able to push back the terrorist forces. They were coming into their countries with the help of the United States and Saudi Arabia. I have a hard time believing that they have enough military capacity to also strike Israel. Yeah, I don't buy it. I love that method-fueled guy. He rocks propaganda. Yeah, I like Lee Camp. I like Lee Camp. Lee Camp is fucking awesome. Joshua Renshaw, people need to stop having this complete ideologically purity requirement. We all have biases and preconceptions that compromise our views. Lee Camp is right 99% of the time. That's not the same. It's not biases. We have a particular way of looking at the world. Those things are relative to one another. Biases assumes that there's, you know, I mean, yeah, biases is fair. But I guess I'm saying, I guess in my head it's a void. And in this void, this space of thought, range of thoughts, and you have certain thoughts that accrue around each other and become this kind of personality or this idea of the world. You have certain people who accrue around. They're close to one another. You have certain people further away. And calling it bias, to me, sounds like it's saying, well, he leans a particular direction as opposed to he just is a particular thing. Like other people are. All these things are relative to one another. Now, in the bias sense, yeah, if somebody is paying you, then yeah, just from an emotional standpoint, you're going to have somewhat of a bias and affinity for it. Even if you push back against it, the bias is still there. So in that case, you're right. I agree with you when we were talking about biases, just in general, and everybody have those. But I think a lot of people, when they say biases and stuff, they're talking about, I guess I feel like all of these perspectives are relative. I can only really gauge this into how it objectively relates to the real world. So this person says they believe in this. Okay, that's great. That's good. You have that philosophy. Now, if you're telling me that philosophy leads to a sustainable world, then I'll say you're a fucking liar. I can challenge it. I can beat your head in over. But just floating in a void, no. I don't know what Lee Camp did in this sense. To me, Lee Camp has always been awesome. One way of looking at the world comes from upbringing, our experiences, the people we meet, that admire, that we don't, the many things, religion, and the things that we don't like. Like our identity. It comes even from those things that we push away from us, not just the things that we like. I like this, 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 and this, but I don't like this. I don't associate myself with that other thing. You know, yeah, agreed. Abrupt anthropomorphic climate change is about to make all these issues trivial. Ice melting in the Arctic is imminent. Basil Peterson, yes. That's the other part to this, right? When I talk about the apocalyptic stuff, I bring up climate as being a big deal because I always look at climate as a big fucking deal. Your environment is falling apart. Your world is falling apart. And then you have methane leaking in the Arctic, which can rapidly expand the climate change thing. Meaning what they're considering for climate change, they're going by these models and they're acting like these models is the real thing. They don't know. This could be far worse. And there could be this accelerated pattern of climate change. They're even talking in some cases about the jet stream shutting down. Like we're talking about cataclysmic changes to our world based upon a mindset, a capitalistic mindset that's rapacious, that doesn't necessarily care about the societal impact of these things, that only cares about getting more and more profit. Hey, the world is falling apart. Yeah, I know, man, but you're fucking around with my profits. So you can understand I can't really do anything about it. Sucks for you guys. We have a fortress somewhere where we can wait this out. Agreed. Let me explain this. Gravity as we experience it doesn't actually exist. It's an illusion because there is no pull. You simply fall along the curve of space-time. That's interesting. That's interesting. Good Winslow. We could have a great time fixing the nature system, lovely works, if we could, instead of this nonsense. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. It's like, what, we spend $1 trillion on the military. What if we cut the military budget in half and instead say, hey, let's spend that money on fixing up this country. Let's have high-speed rail. Fuck it. Let's say rail in a tube using maglevs. Let's go gangbusters. Let's put our engineers to stuff. Let's build big fucking things. Let's pay people to build big fucking things. Let's have these big technological things that we do in this country. Let's do that. Let's not kill and murder around the globe. Let's do that. Let's invest in things. But no, not so much. Not so much. James Wilkes, yes, more than half. I'll take more than half, but fuck it, I'll take half if we're trying to compromise. I'm not a purist. Just cut it by half. Just cut this shit by half. Domino Dracon, show of hands. How many here think that the recent spat of UFO sightings being released by the government is more likely just us? That's interesting. So, Dracon, this is getting into a UFO thing, but there's a lot of people in the UFO community who are extremely skeptical of Tom DeLonge. They see all of this military brass, all of these military personnel, and they think to themselves, the military has lied to us one moment after the next. Even going so far as to have these kind of guys to put on this illusionary stuff or this spycraft stuff to give all of this false information to the UFO community. They've lied constantly. Now Tom DeLonge has organized himself around with all of these particular people, again, who are part of the military establishment, who again have lied continuously. How are we to trust this? That's what they say. These videos don't necessarily show anything very clear where you're looking directly at it. By the same token, the thing that you get out of this are the people who from the government files, who are from the government, who are in the military, who say, yes, I was in the military, I saw this, we were engaged with this. Now you can say those people are lying, you can say those people are not telling the truth, and you can say those people are part of something. Fair enough. I guess my thing is I don't know. When I was younger, I wanted this issue to come to the forefront, and I wanted this issue out in the open. As I got older, I became more cynical. So I'm yeah, I still want the issue out. My heart is saying, yes, you want it out, you want it out. And the thing in my head is like, oh dude, people are maniacs, you don't want that out. Look at what these people are doing. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's one of those evaluations you have to make for yourself with the Tom DeLonge stuff. I like greatly, though, that it's talked about. I like greatly that it's talked about. I like greatly that we're having a conversation. I don't like the tenor of threat that they're associated with it in some of these conversations. That I do not like. And that has a particular spin to it that I don't like where that's going. Like, it's one thing to say, the Ruskies. Okay, well, we know what the Ruskies are. They're just human beings. They're people. They're just like us. What is it when it's not like us? How much money do you spend on that? And not just not like us. When it's, they have a technology that can shut down our weapons and that can go from point A to point B, and God knows time, they seem to use gravity in a particular way, and if they're getting here, they use the technology and physics that we don't understand. What does that look like in the standpoint of the public? Look at the hysteria around the Russia stuff. Capitalism is not going anywhere. What is the media going to do when they're going to try to maximize their profits off of people who are terrified? Like I'm trying to get across like how people are going to behave in this scenario. How are institutions going to behave? How is the military going to behave? How is the media going to behave? How are these people going to behave? Do you think they're going to be the better angels of their natures? And if so, why? What gives you that impression? We're in a society where truth has been monetized, and not just monetized, it's squandered. We have no idea what the actual truth is, and there's not necessarily trust in the institutions themselves to provide that truth. How do you navigate a world where you're talking about some other planetary thing dealing with us when you can't even trust the things that are already around you? That's terrifying. I'm just saying, we're living in a terrifying reality. That's all. So I don't know about the Tom DeLonge thing. I do like that it's out in the open. I don't necessarily like the tenor of the conversation sometimes. So, I feel you though. I feel you. Bob Ramirez said, everyone knows that the pyramids are made of chocolate. Swiss cheese, Bob. Swiss cheese, Bob. You lost your, you didn't. Swiss cheese, wrong article. When you get burn, bro. It's cold up here on the moon, and there's not much cheese, as I was led to believe. Oh, that's funny, Winkle. That's funny. That was funny. Edward Davis. I love this. Ah, I'm glad, Edward. Dax Jacobson, communists from space, don't. I love that. They don't tell us because they're not using money. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. And somebody was like, do they believe in Jesus? And this is why. I'm like, maybe we shouldn't release this. Do they believe in Jesus? It's a perfect reason why I'm like, oh, it hurts. It hurts for me to even hear that question. And then to call them communists is even worse. Communists, socialists, capitalists, these aren't real. These are figments of your imagination. These are ways that you call organizing yourselves. One is not necessarily better than the other. Do you have choice? Like how you organize yourself and the way you organize your resources and everything else. Who the fuck cares? I care about democratic processes. I care about being able to affect my society in itself. I don't care about how we organize ourselves if we organize ourselves in ways where people have the things that they need. I'm less picky on that front. Personally, I would prefer to use technology to make sure people have the basics. And then from there, have at it. Be free. But the question would be raised. Are they capitalists? Are they communists? Are you telling me socialists from space? Leninists from space? Honestly, that terrifies me more than anything that's coming to our shores. I am more terrified of the human beings than I am of the aliens, if aliens were coming to this planet. I'm still waiting for Jamal to admit that MLK supported Bernie's policies and not Hillary's. So clearly that means MLK is racist. How can you justify that? What are you talking about? Of course he supported Bernie Sanders' policies. He was a socialist. He was an anti-imperialist socialist. I mean, come on. I hope you're being sarcastic. I honestly hope you're being sarcastic. I really hope you're being sarcastic. The order of chaos. If you want to engage in and with the order of possibilities of such alien beings, you must first dismantle existing global elite controlled national governments. Agreed. Agreed. That's my point. We have none of this stuff has legitimacy. Zero. These guys put narratives. These guys are bought. None of them have legitimacy. The news, the media is lying to you. They're giving you a point of view that's not necessarily all that accurate all the time. Oftentimes it's often tilted or look at the Syria story. Look at how they're going to cover this. Yeah, this stuff needs to be dismantled. I agree with you. How can you? Yeah, it's like you can't trust the information. I guess that's the thing that bothers me or concerns me. You're dealing in a situation where there's not much trust, and you're dealing with a situation that's not much trust. Are you going to trust the information that's coming to you if that information is somewhat fantastic, and if it's coming from a source that you already don't necessarily trust? How do you navigate around that? How do you navigate around that? Say for the moment that is an alien being. Imagine the shit that's going to... What is Alex Jones going to say? What is Alex Jones going to say? What are people like Alex Jones going to say? You're going to have people, they're eating my babies. I knew they were eating babies. They're eating cattle. I saw one eat a head off of a cow. You're going to hear all sorts of shit blasting the airways. What's true? They've lost their legitimacy. They've lost that standard of truth. What's going to be true? What is the public going to accept as reality? How is the public going to break on this? What if you have a large section of the population that believes these guys are coming to eat us? I'm just saying, man. This is not the best of times. I'll just say it that way. This is not the best of times. All right, guys. I'm not going to keep this one long. I'm actually shocked as shit that there are 111 people here at 12:13 in the morning. Yeah, I'll leave it at this, man. I'm glad you guys showed up, and I'm glad you guys... I don't know how much everyone caught. But at the very least, gave me the opportunity to express a point of view. Now, the point of view is just 420. It's just let's live in a space for a few moments. Get away skepticism, get away doubt. Just live in a space for a moment. And what does this world look like? What is this world? How does this feel? How does this function? What is it like to get up in the morning? What is it like to go to bed at night? What is it like when I decide to do the thing that I want to do because that's what I want to do it? What if I decide I want to get my doctorate? What about 2 doctorates? Hey, fuck it. Let's say 3. What if I get 2 doctorates, then I go into some kind of field to push this level of physics? It's a different world. It's a fundamentally different society. It's not impossible. Everything that we need to make that society take place exists right now. One thing that's missing: the cognitive gap. Our value system now, how we think now, this idea of profit and status that's created based upon the system that we function in, that we've always functioned in, that we've grown up in, that we've been ensconced in. It's to some degree creating a value system. It's the gap between the value system in this life versus the value system in that world. Those things are just us. Everything else exists to make that world a reality. So I will leave it at that. Thank you all for showing up. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.